Hi, I'm Joe Connolly with somebody who knows street by street how businesses are doing. James Metham, the director of the Flatiron 23rd Street Business Improvement District, which should be a good bellwether for us because the Flatiron has both many businesses, small and large companies, but they also have very high residential levels in the area as well. So, James, what is the buzz? What is the talk on the sidewalks and streets of the Flatiron here, fall 2021?
It's a pleasure being here with you, Joe and Neil. It's That's right. It's fall. You can feel the crispness in the weather here in Flatiron and Nomad. And I know when we last spoke earlier in the year, we were very bullish on how things were going to turn out with the vaccine on the horizon and spread dropping. And look, we went through a kind of a golden period in early June, early July, when it really felt that way. And the past couple months have been a little tough in terms of a full return and a snapback that many of us were hoping for when it comes to our local economy, both in the city and in Flatiron. But we're encouraged again as we entered October here. We're seeing more and more people out in the streets, frequenting our wonderful dining establishments, some of our dry good retail, some of our experiential retail as well. And starting to gradually see an uptick that we had really expected earlier of some of our office workers. That's going to be we talk about bellwether, getting more of our commercial offices filled with people that had previously frequented and filled those spaces, over 100,000 during pre-pandemic times. We're starting to see a tick up there. It's still gradual. It hasn't been full back to office, hasn't been full back to international tourism. But like you said, Joe, we're kind of an example of that mixed-use community and neighborhood that works symbiotically. So, the mix of residents, workers, visitors, students, that's what we're really moving towards. And hopefully we keep on that trajectory.
I notice as you say it, the return to offices has been gradual, and you may not see it day to day, but it starts to pick up. Do you hear, is that because the companies don't want the employees back yet? Or if the employees are resisting working at the office full time?
It's mixed. I think there's, especially in our neighborhood where we have so many examples of innovative and creative tech, artistic, media, information businesses that have frankly succeeded over the past 2 years in working in this kind of hybrid remote environment. So you have a lot of people, employees that have found a way to make the most of working from their homes and are comfortable in doing that. At the same time, I think everyone sees the value in coming back together in a creative environment that's not just confined to the walls that you're in, but just the air that you breathe in a neighborhood like Flatiron and Nomad, where there's just an abundance of like-minded organizations, companies that are spurring the future of the kind of the digital economy. So right now it's a mix. We're hearing there was a real effort over the summer in the spring to lay out plans for at least a greater return to the office in terms of certain days of the week when people were expected to be in, a certain number of hours and filling of the spaces. That flipped a little bit during Delta, right? During the past 2 months. And I think a lot of organizations played it safe, knowing that they could still function efficiently. And they pushed back some of their stricter return to office timelines to this fall and in some cases to 2022. With that, in the return to public schools opening and schools opening as well, I mean, we saw September towards the end of the month, we started to see an uptick in both foot traffic as well as some other data indicators that show that we're starting to tick up in the number of office workers returning. We're on a good day, we're about 30% of where we were pre-pandemic, but we're getting closer to sticking and growing that 30% rather than remaining at lower levels of 20%.
Before we get over to Neil, are you hearing any speculation, James, on what office buildings will be like if they're permanently at lower capacity? Are any new uses or new tenants starting to emerge, or are we too early for that?
Well, we've certainly seen over the past year an influx of subleases in Midtown South generally, which includes Flatiron and Nomad. Some of these larger footprints or that were held by some large organizations and companies have relinquished some of those and put those on the market, which has really opened up an opportunity and builds into kind of the historical nature of innovation and entrepreneurship that has made Flatiron and Nomad a special place for really creative ideas and starting off in startups. So we've started to hear of leasing interest and leasing uptick from our friends in the commercial office and brokerage community. And I think most people in that industry are optimistic that despite a greater amount of availability, that what will come of that will be some new organizations and partners and innovators.
And the new leases, the subleases, are they generally signed by a new business moving in that did not have space? Is it usually occupied by some new company?
That's right. We're seeing new companies being both interested, and we're seeing some smaller organizations, smaller companies that may have been in or around the neighborhood, but perhaps were priced out or couldn't afford a larger footprint, taking advantage of the opportunity to expand while rates are a little bit lower, availability's up, and working relationships with really concerned landlords that will have a vested interest in making sure that this area continues to be vibrant with innovative partners.
Interesting. Neil.
James, tell us a little bit more about these new businesses. What types of new businesses have come in this year?
Well, I mean, on the commercial office side, we've seen a continuing trend of tech, media, info organizations. We've also seen the start of a life science hub on Park Avenue South, which was invested in before the pandemic. And it's all towards this kind of diversifying of the economy and strengthening our neighborhoods. And I think honestly that's a big reason why some of these creative hubs and nodes, whether it be Flatiron or elsewhere in the city, are going to be resilient, will continue to be a place for creative agglomeration, as because we're not just relying on one type of tenant or one type of industry anymore. New York City as a whole learned some very critical lessons, I think, post 9/11, post recession, and various other cycles, that it's not just about, we're not a one industry town anymore. And so where we are, concerned is like, well, how do we get all of this back into one space so that symbiotic relationship between commercial office and the retail services on the ground floor that work together with those businesses and their many employees, how that can get back humming again at close to pre-pandemic levels. And between the number of workers that we're seeing come back in, as well as the number of visitors, it's still on that gradual trend up, which we're fortunate about, but it's not there yet, and we still have work to do.
Yeah, and James, I wonder, obviously these businesses have been through so much in the past year and a half. What are some of the changes that have paid off for the businesses that have survived?
Yeah, I mean, again, back to that point of resiliency. I mean, if we're talking about, our really critical ground floor retailers, our restaurants and dining establishments and service sector businesses that really make for that kind of the special, they're part of the special ingredients that make the living and living experience, the human experience of moving through Flatiron Nomad so special. They've learned that there is a community here, not just entirely dictated by office workers and tourists, but there is a growing residential community in and around this area of Manhattan, to the point where, you know, one benefit of work from home is that you have more people working from home and living in Flatiron and Nomad, and thereby, you know, going out to eat here at all hours of the day. And so that, combined with, you know, some of the outdoor dining and open streets that we've been a big promoter of, and using our public spaces and our public realm to facilitate a safe spaces for all to engage in life and commerce as well. That's been critical. And I mean, we've heard, if anything, especially with some of our higher end dining establishments, that one of the biggest problems they have is just maintaining a working staff and labor, because they're doing pretty well out there with their expanded footprints on the streets and sidewalks. And we've tried to complement all of that by making sure that the sidewalks and our plazas are also there to welcome as many people in.
James, I noticed you have a great website. It's real good with visuals, and it's very deep. You have a lot of monthly news reports on what's happening in the entertainment business, the restaurants, the larger businesses, the neighborhood. There are deals in the Flatiron district that are promoted on there. Does that website get you a lot of activity? And I ask for others because it looks like it takes a lot of work to have a website with that much information, and that looks real good.
Well, I can tell you that our team works tremendously hard on making sure that the information that we're putting out is fresh and relevant. And that took on a whole new meaning, as you mentioned, Joe, for the past 2 years, where, you know, information whiplash was happening at every turn. And getting that out to not only our business community, but also to our greater visitor community, residential community, was critical. So, yeah, we're proud of the work we do on a variety of our communication channels, whether it be our website, our social media. But it's another, you know, communicating with all sorts of people and businesses. It takes various channels. So we try to
get traffic though. Does it get traffic though? Do the businesses use it? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we think so. The metrics show that they do. And in terms of an uptick, particularly over the past year, we've seen our kind of data and business resources information go up. And then our Instagram, you know, numbers continue to tick up. I think we're north of 26,000 followers now. And yeah.
Nice. Neil.
James, tell us a little bit about the recent expansion of the Business Improvement District. How will that help businesses in the area and maybe attract new ones as well?
Yeah, so we've been, I think we may have touched on this very briefly where we were when we last spoke, but we've been at this effort for expanding the boundaries of the Flatiron Business Improvement District for several years. And, you know, this was a concerted effort by stakeholders in the Nomad area, up 6th Avenue to 31st Street, over to Park Avenue, and down to 20th Street, nearly considering doubling the size of our current footprint. And, you know, with patience and fortitude and a lot of planning and outreach, you know, we brought the proposal to the city earlier this year, and it went through a land use process. And finally, this summer, our city council did enact legislation permitting us to expand our services up to 31st Street and down to 20th Street. And so what that's going to mean, effective this coming January, is that a lot of that, you know, the core quality of life work that we bring to the table, and actually to set the table for more vibrancy in terms of commercial and business growth, will be brought to the streets and sidewalks of Nomad. And that means there are supplemental cleaning services. That means our public safety officers on the beat working with our city agencies, homeless outreach as well, and then marketing, concerted marketing and district promotions for the business community that resides in this greater footprint.
A couple of other quick questions, James, just to wrap up. The Flatiron building itself, the famous building, is being renovated inside. How will it be different, and what will that mean to the area?
Well, the Flatiron building is a historic landmark anchor. I mean, it's our namesake, right? and despite the fact that we're growing up further north and embracing Nomad and other communities, it's critical. It's the prow of the ship. And so we're really excited about the work that is ongoing inside and outside in terms of facade renovations with the Flatiron building. It's being brought to 2021 standards, right? I mean, if you had walked in there just a year or so ago, you would have felt like you were walking back into the 1970s. So while it's still so there's still work being done. It's not going to be tenanted anytime in the next few months or so. When it is, hopefully in 2022 or beyond, it's going to be a space that is state of the art, both in terms of its commercial office space as well as some of the great retail on the ground floor that's so critical for that 23rd Broadway and Fifth Avenue junction.
I've read that one problem in that beautiful building for businesses was that you couldn't get many desks or offices into the prow of that ship, so that the most famous part of it actually is not effective for businesses anymore.
You have to come with a
What do you like about economic development? Last question. What do you like about economic development?
I mean, look, I think I take a local economic development approach, right? I mean, there's so many micro and macro levels to this, but I really hone in on the hyper local part of economic development, because it involves so many different pieces of society ultimately working together in some virtuous cycle. And so, economic development is uplifting for individuals. It's uplifting for families, and it's uplifting for, in our case, what I think is a special corner of New York City that with jobs, with business entrepreneurship, innovation mixed in with important public realm improvements like our Nomad Piazza and our slow streets on 23rd to 21st of Broadway. All of that comes together and creates a special mix in a place where commerce can grow. And people, as we've seen in New York City over the past 2 decades, want to live, work, and play and visit together.
And there's the college course synopsis of Economic Development 101. Beautifully said, James. And I just want to add before we close, I tell business people this sometimes, that there are 160, I believe, business improvement districts in New York City. And the people there can connect you to information that can help you as a business owner. And they are a resource for sales and clients for you, because people like James know who's thinking about doing what and who might expand and who might move in. So the business improvement districts are a critically, potentially very important source of info for you. You should go and meet them, and you can find the contacts very easily, whatever neighborhood you're in. Just Google New York City business improvement districts, and every single one of them and their phone number and website will come up, and you'll meet people like James. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Neil. Always a pleasure talking.